Hello, Microsoft Ignite attendees. Thank you for joining our session, Enterprise Storage for Azure VMware Solution. We're going to show you how you can make it simple, how you can scale storage, and how you can save money. My name is Kyle Grossmiller. I'm a Principal Cloud Technical Specialist at Pure Storage, and I'm joined with my friend Husam. Husam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kyle. My name is Husam Hilal. I'm a partner and solution architect in the partner orgs at Microsoft, and I've been in Microsoft for 7 years and focusing primarily these days on Azure VMware Solution.
Right on. So I'm going to take it back for a few minutes and we're going to talk, just to kind of set the stage here, right? I think that most people who have undergone either a migration or a cloud first initiative into Azure, have found that there are oftentimes siloed environments, right? Maybe you've got data on premises, maybe you've got it at a third-party hyperscaler, and then you've got it inside of Azure as well. What we find time and time again with customers is that you need that ability to scale with rigor and control. But at the end of the day, data is truly the lifeblood of your business. So having it commonly accessible across those different planes really is how we see the customers doing it right, are able to really scale their agility and having accessibility across the board. A couple studies here from TechTarget, 72% of organizations today have a cloud first or hybrid cloud strategy. 90% of applications will be multi-cloud by 2028. So this is something that is being worked on heavily today, and we're only going to see more of it in the future. When we look through the lens of VMware, though, if you've got a cloud first mindset or opportunity and you're moving VMware migrations into Azure, there are 4 main reasons that we see why they can be blocked. Not disaggregating storage from compute. That is not being able to independently scale compute and storage. That can lead to wasted budget, wasted resources, data silos, data not being protected, not having that enterprise data feature set that is table stakes on premises. And then last but not least, it's just there's a ton of complexity there. So it becomes really difficult to migrate and manage. And again, at the base layer, storage is a component for all 4 of these. What you need for a successful VMware migration into Azure, you need to disaggregate storage from compute. Being able to independently scale storage from compute is critically important, especially for those really large data footprints on premises that you're moving into the cloud. That leads to not only saving money on your storage budget, but it also leads it to be a lot more predictable. Having that enterprise feature set, snapshots, replication solutions, that's really important when you move into Azure VMware Solution. And then last but not least, as Husam will talk to, that kind of familiar tooling that you have with Azure VMware Solution, so you're not having to completely learn something new in the cloud as you move over to it. I'm going to briefly touch on this now, and we will revisit it with a lot more detail later. But we're pleased to announce, that Pure Storage Cloud Azure Native, this is our first party managed service, is now generally available. We worked a lot with Husam and a lot of other people at Microsoft as a co-development solution. And this is really a neat solution, I think, that will open up and kind of illustrate how easy it is to move these workloads into the cloud at the storage layer. But before we do that, I'm going to pass it to Husam to talk a little bit about AVS, what AVS is, and what advantages it brings. So take it away, Husam.
Yep, thank you so much, Kyle, and congrats for the new offering. This is so exciting.
Absolutely.
AVS. Oh, since we're talking about VMware migration to the cloud or to Azure, let's talk about AVS and see what it is. It's basically a comprehensive VMware environment that runs on Azure dedicated infrastructure. It's based on a hyperconverged infrastructure, and it's built by Microsoft and verified by VMware. It allows you to run VMware workloads natively on the Azure platform. Definitely, you can move your workloads seamlessly with no refactoring, no changes from on-prem into Azure VMware Solution, which makes it the most rapid, least risky migration ever. Again, the service is sold, operated, and supported by Microsoft. It allows you to migrate on-prem workloads, VMs quickly, as I mentioned, low risk, and you can still leverage familiar tools and operations with no changes at all. With AVS, we'll talk more in the next slides about the benefits that you get on cost stabilization and make sure you have predictable operations in the cloud. From there, let's talk more about how the service looks like in Azure. So at the left side, you see what the VMware stack looks like on-prem today at your potential data center. On the right side, you can see very similar stack, which is technically, in this case, the Azure VMware Solution, running VCF. And once you have some sort of connectivity between the on-premises environment to Azure, that can be Azure Express Route or VPN connectivity, then you can leverage the VMware existing tools like HCX and use vMotion style migration to move VMs as is from the on-premises environment to the Azure VMware Solution environment. And you can see there's no change into the VMs. It's the same storage, same compute, same networking. So there's no need to do any refactoring or rebuilding for your applications or workloads. As I mentioned, everything we run on AVS is certified by VMware or Broadcom. So we always make sure we run with compliant with everything they build. All right. And AVS is just another Azure service, right? So it inherits everything that you get in Azure. And what's special that you get to integrate with more than 200 services available in the Azure ecosystem. Some of the examples you can think of, like Microsoft Intro ID, or used to called Azure AD, Microsoft Fabric for your data, Azure AI services, which is a pressing need or pressing requirement for many of the customers today, Azure security services and storage services, and so forth. But also what equally important there, that you can integrate with whatever we have in the Microsoft Marketplace today, from a network storage appliances, virtual appliances, backup solution, and even DR solutions. And in this case, we're going to talk about the pure storage solution in the next few slides. Now, to understand more about how we offer the Azure VMware Solution, so what you technically buy, you buy the hosts, right? This is what you pay on. It's an hourly based charging that you pay for. You need at least to purchase 3 hosts together to build the VCF environment in Azure. And then from the 3 nodes, you can scale up as many as you got, following the limitations that we have on this slide. Now, this slide talks about different SKUs that we provide today, part of the service. I'm not going to drain this slide and talk about the specifications of CPU, memory, and storage, but I want to just highlight one thing there, which is the storage capacity. So I mentioned previously, this is a hyperconverged infrastructure, and part of the VCF, we use the vSAN storage that's available on those hosts. You can always expand storage by adding more nodes, and this will keep expanding your vSAN total capacity. That is sometimes not cost efficient, right? Because if you're not utilizing the CPU and the memory on those hosts, you're just adding hosts for storage, that's not cost efficient and that's not scalable. And that's why also we provide external storage integrations with AVS. And that's where the pure service that Kyle mentioned integrates with. And we'll talk about that in more details in a second. From there, let me talk more about some of the key factors to shrink your total cost of ownership and operation with AVS. One of the most important things I want to talk about here is the same platform, right? So you can leverage your same skills, same operations, no refactoring to the code or anything. You're just moving your applications as is. And that leads you, as I mentioned previously, to the most rapid migration. And the most rapid migration really means you're avoiding the double spending or double mortgage, because you will not need, if you move quickly to Azure, you don't need to pay the on-prem bills and the cloud bills at the same time. If you could just move everything quickly to the cloud, you definitely stop paying the on-premises bills, and that avoids you to have 2 mortgages at the same time. AVS, part of Azure ecosystem, also have the offerings we provide with reserved instances where you can lock pricing and also get discounts up to 60% on the price of the service for 1 year, 3 years, and now we have an offering until the end of this calendar year for 5 years reserved instances. The AVS is a managed environment, so it helps you to move from CapEx to OpEx, and this definitely will allow you to skip a lot of the operational overhead costs that you are paying today on premises. And one of the things I like to talk about about saving cost is, generally speaking, when you think about the size of hosts that customers are running on-prem compared to the SKUs that we provide in Azure, we have more capacity in the SKUs that we have in Azure. And that means you could potentially have more hosts on premises before you migrate to AVS. For example, you could be having 40 hosts. And from 40, when you go to AVS, this can be 20 or this can be 15. And how that really helps you when you're buying licensing. Think about Windows Server Data Center, or think about SQL Enterprise, or even think about Red Hat Linux. All this will be licensed at the host, and if you end up having less number of hosts, that means you need to purchase less licenses. From that, let me quickly move on to compliance coverage. Again, AVS is a managed virtualization, so you get compliance coverage from the moment you deploy AVS. You don't have to really worry about certifications and compliance in like healthcare, like HIPAA, or finance, like PCI with AVS, compared to other VMware offerings where you still have to worry about certifying your environment because you still have to manage the virtualization there. AVS definitely honors license portability, and that's very importantly to think about VCF. So if you have VCF license today, just bring it with you to AVS. You'll be ready to get to go with deploying AVS and using your VCF license. But does not stop there. Even if you have Windows and SQL licenses under software assurance or any mobility agreement with Microsoft, you can bring those also as is without having to repurchase licenses when you migrate. And what's very unique in the AVS or Azure offering is the extended security updates, or ESUs, for Windows Server 2012 and SQL 2014. These are totally free, no cost, when you bring them to AVS or the Azure ecosystem, and that you don't get anywhere else. That's really, for a lot of customers I've talked with, is a deal breaker. It's like, really, I've been paying all this money, now I can just get it for free if I just move things around? And the answer is yes. And last but not least is the storage expansion, as I mentioned that before. With AVS, we allow you to scale hosts independently from the storage, or expand storage independently from the host, I should say, because this is, again, if you have storage extensive workloads and you just need to add more storage without have to pay for not utilized CPU and memory, that's where we can leverage those options. And the one we're going to focus on today is a new pure cloud storage service that is now integrated natively with the Azure ecosystem. With that, let me bring it over back to you, Kyle, and we'll learn about the new service.
Thanks a lot, my friend. Yeah, so as we mentioned earlier, right, this is a new offering. It is a first-party managed service. Those who are familiar with Pure Storage in our ecosystem will see a lot of similarities here, between some similarities and some differences. Because this is a first-party native service that's part of the Azure marketplace, it really makes it a lot easier to deploy. But the same data reduction, the same encryption, a lot of the same technologies that you're used to from, say, the on-premises flash array are integrated here as well. Cost savings, I think, is obviously top of mind for many folks today. So if we look at this just from a really basic example, right? If I've got a 206 terabyte storage footprint that I want to move to AVS from on-premises, if I were to use AV36P nodes, that's about 15 nodes. Now, those might be compute and memory intensive, they might not. If they're not, then you're wasting compute and memory. And by disaggregating your storage from your compute, you're essentially able to take that down to 5 nodes. So that also saves you on that dreaded Broadcom licensing charges as well, right? So a lot of different opportunities here to save money. Again, this is a simplistic example, but I think the cost savings become very dramatic, especially for the larger your storage footprint that you're looking to move onto AVS. With our native service as well, it's very flexible. You only pay for what you consume. So that enables you to not only over provision volumes, but also we use thin provisioning. So you're actually truly only paying for what you're writing to us. You can also allocate performance within the portal, which we'll show at a demo at the end here. But just to kind of illustrate what this actually looks like within the portal, I'll bump ahead one slide here. But before I do that, there are two different subscription plans, similar to what Husam mentioned with reserved instances. We have fixed plans, 1 to 3 year commits. You can also just pay as you go. There's reserved capacity and performance. And if you go above that, you can boost above it anytime. And this does go against your Azure spend. So if you've got an Azure Mac agreement, for example, that will come into play here. And yeah, just to illustrate, provisioned versus used capacity. Here I've provisioned a 200 gig volume. I'm only using 19. So I'm only paying for that 19 gigs that I've written on this AVS virtual machine. So again, that's kind of the power here, right? Is you can, if you know something's going to grow over time, you can over provision that volume and then be able to write to it, without having to constantly resize or upsize it. And I'm not paying for that 250 gig provision size here. With that, we promised a demo. So to close this out, I'm just going to show just truly how easy this service is to deploy. So here I've got my AV64 cluster. This is running in US East. And what I'm going to do here is really, this is all I need to do to set up our native service. So here's my Azure Virtual Network. These are my AVS subnets. This is a fleet native instance. And now what I'm going to do is create a new subnet and just delegate that subnet to our Pure Storage Azure native service. So Pure Storage Cloud. We recommend, you can kind of do, I think it's a minimum of a -26, but I think a -24 is good just to give you a little bit of headroom to grow that IP space. But now if we look on our services, we can see there's our pure storage.block service pool. I add it. That's really my only prerequisite I need to do to deploy this service, right? So I just delegate a subnet to it. We can see there it is. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually deploy the native service itself. What this is you can effectively think of this as setting up kind of your billing instance inside of Azure. So all I'm going to give it here is my resource group. And I'm also going to give it what region it's in, a name, and then what billing term and billing details do I have. This takes a couple minutes to deploy. You can see this is obviously a Pure Storage kind of internal one, but I'm putting in my company address, some other information here, and then I'm just going to create it. Okay, so I've created the service, and that service is essentially now a container for all of the other stuff that we're going to deploy and connect up to Azure VMware Solution. So if we go into the resource, there is my Pure Storage Cloud Fleet Native service. And now I'm going to create what we call a storage pool. So the storage pool will be in, ideally the same resource group as AVS. Doesn't have to be, but it can be. I'm going to give it a name. And then importantly, Azure VMware Solution is deployed into an availability zone. So I want to pick the same availability zone as Azure VMware Solution. And then I'm going to select my virtual network and then that subnet I created back in the first step. And this takes maybe half an hour to an hour because this is actually deploying all the underlying Pure Storage goodness on top of native Azure componentry. So I skipped ahead here, but here we can see the storage pool has been created. And now I'm going to click this button to connect it up to Azure VMware Solution. So there's my AVS instance. I click connect. And what that does is it actually installs and deploys our Pure Storage vSphere plugin onto your AVS instance. So all of their future management of this is done via our plugin, which is super familiar for Pure Storage customers on premises. So if I go over to my AVS vCenter console, you can see that there is, give it just a second here. It's configuring everything automatically for us. There's my Pure Storage plugin. And now I can start to do stuff like creating a data store, right? So all this stuff is now basically inherently managed from within the vCenter console. So I'm going to create the data store. Just click through, give it a name, give it a size. Again, super simple here. We're not doing anything crazy. And again, this volume is also over provisioned. So you can make this 30 terabytes, use 10, use whatever you want, but you're only going to pay for what you write to this. So you can over provision this volume so you don't have to continually resize it in the future. And that's it. That's all there is to it for setting this up. If you want to learn more about our joint integration, please take a look at this QR code. I want to thank Husam, as always, for joining me. We've presented a few times together. It's always good to see you and appreciate your time. Any closing thoughts?
No, this is really amazing integration. Like I really like about it, Kyle, is like it's very seamless and native into the Azure portal. Like you don't have to really change a lot of tools and move things around and make it really easy for people to adopt the service and start using it. Again, pleasure for presenting with you again, for having me. And yeah, we're hopefully excited to see more people joining and using Azure VMware Solution with this pure integration as we go.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate your time.